tarde, muito obrigada. Sou Dana Van Brandt, agente cultural do Consulado Geral dos Estados Unidos aqui em São Paulo. Somos muito felizes ser aqui com vocês para esse programa e trabalhar em parceria com a Fundação Getúlio Vargas. E eu quero agradecer muito a nossos parceiros aqui e vamos aproveitar as palavras do professor Alvarez e muito obrigada.
Boa tarde, eu sou Maria Lúcia Padua Lima, aqui da Fundação Getúlio Vargas, da Escola de Direito. Estamos muito felizes em tê-los aqui para assistirmos à palestra do professor José Alvarez, da New York University. O professor Alvarez é especialista na área de investimentos diretos do estrangeiro e tem um enfoque muito importante na área de solução de conflitos por meio de arbitragem e vai nos oferecer essa palestra. Nós queremos agradecer ao consulado americano que, mais uma vez, nessa parceria, nos possibilitou a ter essa presença tão importante de um especialista nessa área. E para nós utilizarmos da melhor maneira possível essa oportunidade, nós convidamos dois professores aqui da casa, a professora Alessandra Mourão, que é nossa professora na área de negociação, especializada nessa área, inclusive prestando também serviços de advocacia nessa área, e professora do GVLO, assim como o professor Rabih Nasser, também nosso professor, que nos honra aqui com a presença, especialista nesta área de negociações também internacionais, professor da escola e sócio da Nasser Advogados. Então, agradeço mais uma vez a participação e o apoio do Consulado Americano, a presença do professor Alvarez. Muito obrigada, professor. Muitas graças. Thank you very much for your presence here now. Eu gostaria de agradecer também a professora Alessandra, ao professor Rabih, e vamos iniciar. A nossa ideia é que o professor Alvarez fará uma exposição, né? Após essa exposição, a professora Alessandra e o professor Rabih farão seus comentários e abriremos para vocês para perguntas, tá certo? Nós vamos manter uma disposição bastante informal, né? E eu gostaria que todos se sentissem à vontade para depois colocarem suas questões. Muito obrigada.
Well, thank you. I apologize that I cannot speak Portuguese, and I was told that my Spanish wouldn't quite do it. So again, thank you all. Thanks to the U.S. Consulate, and thank you for GV for hosting me. And what I decided to do in this talk was actually do more about the regime itself, because I assume that some of you may not be familiar with the foreign investment regime, and then a little, if we have the time, to talk about specifically the Argentina cases as an example of the regime. So most of you are familiar with the concept of foreign direct investment. That's the idea that a foreign enterprise is establishing a company in another host country and does it through, say, greenfield investment, where they establish the enterprise from scratch. Another possibility would be a merger or an acquisition. And what we're talking about with foreign direct investment is obviously assumption of risk, a lasting direct control of an enterprise, and hopefully some economic, hopefully beneficial economic impact on the host country.
Okay. Will you excuse me, Professor, if I speak in Portuguese?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'll just listen.
Okay, thank you. Just, I promise translators I will speak very slow so that Professor will get as much as possible, and also counting on your knowledge of Spanish. But anyway, since we are here with most audience and being Brazilians, I decided to address the talks in Portuguese. Bom, o meu maior interesse em aceitar esse convite para participar da mesa, logicamente, tem a ver com o contexto econômico. Quando se fala em crise global, todos nós que militamos e atuamos com negociações e com contratos internacionais, estamos muito atentos ao impacto do que está acontecendo no mundo econômico com os contratos, com o dia a dia das empresas que nós trabalhamos. E quando fala em Argentina, então, quer dizer, os nossos sentimentos pela Argentina, do futebol até os negócios, são muito grandes. Então, falou que o professor Alvarez vinha aqui nos falar, e um profundo conhecedor das brigas do governo argentino, da Argentina com os investidores. Eu fiquei, assim, muito entusiasmado de ouvir, aprender e ainda pegar um assento privilegiado aqui na frente. Então, essa rápida e simpática conversa já trouxe uma série de informações muito interessantes. E eu, como professora de negociação e estudiosa de negociação, tomei a liberdade de ler um pouco dos escritos do professor, e o que me chamou a atenção dentro da minha área de conhecimento foi um argumento trazido pela Argentina nas arbitragens, no sentido de que ela achava que os investidores não deveriam ter os seus pleitos considerados pelos tribunais arbitrais, porque com alguns deles ela estava num processo de negociação.
In 2005, there has been a meeting in the Confederation of the Industries here of Brazil to discuss the Brazilian agenda regarding investment treaties, right, in 2005. And there were investors invited, and two of them representing Duke Energy and Endesa, a U.S. company and a Spanish company, said very clearly, our investments in Brazil do not depend on the existence of a bid. This is not a relevant factor for us. But they said at the same time, when investing in other countries, this may be an important factor, right? Mm-hmm. And the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil at the meeting said that the working group that was working on this issue as of 2003, they reviewed the bids that had been signed by Brazil, and they felt very strongly that they are very directed towards protecting the investors, right? And that for this reason, he did not see many chances of them being ratified. Not surprisingly, since 2005, not much has happened regarding this subject in Brazil. There is today almost widespread impression that Brazil has done well in not ratifying the bids that we signed in the 90s, right? I would like to put a little bit in context this attitude of Brazil, and so that you can, if you can comment on this, right? There are obviously, as you mentioned, three levels of regulation regarding the investment, foreign investments. There is the multilateral level, and you mentioned we have some rules at the WTO specifically regarding trade-related investment measures, right? There is the regional level, and there is the bilateral level. In the multilateral level, Brazil has been historically suspicious against the attempts to include new subjects in the WTO. This was, so in the Uruguay round, in the first half of the Uruguay round until 1990, Brazil led the opposition to the inclusion of these new issues in the multilateral agenda, including investment, together with India, basically.
I just wanted to expand on the professor's question here, and you explained a bit about how there's this tendency towards, regional elaboration of different bits. Now, I wanted to know, is there, also sparked by the controversy of the Argentine cases, is there interest from an international organization such as the WTO to bring these bits, kind of merge or fuse them together and come up with something that is a international model that lays down the ground rules and regulates what are the minimum requirements of a BIT and what can or cannot be in one of these agreements?
Well, I think you alluded to the problems. The WTO has tried to be the venue for investment negotiations, and it was an open-ended question at Doha whether they would. But the fact remains that the 150 or so countries, 153 or whatever it is that are the WTO, do not feel, for one reason or another, either that there is a need or that this is the right place. Now, at the OECD, the negotiations collapsed in 1998, in part because it was perceived that this was a rich club imposing the rules on the rest. And that was a bad thing in terms of optics, certainly. But actually, the negotiations collapsed when you looked more closely because, in part, of very serious objections from the perspective of the Canadians and the French, who thought that this would strike at French cultural and linguistic dominance. That is, they thought that this would prevent French government subsidies to publishers, to movie industries, and so forth, and that this was a strike against francophones around the world. And that was generated also by NGOs and others. So it was a cultural exception that they wanted, which, of course, was not favorable to Hollywood. And so that helped to bring down the whole thing. But that suggests the difficulties of multilateral negotiation. Now, there is always talk of bringing this back, maybe not under the WTO since that failed, maybe not under the OECD since that failed, but maybe under some other auspices, UNCTAD or some other more neutral place. But the bottom line is you need not just all these states, you need the stakeholders involved here to be interested. And one of the slides I did not put up is the stakeholders involved in this regime, which include business. They have to support this because what's the point if business is not behind it? So when Norway released its model BIT, that was let's just say, a center-left dream of a BIT. The business groups in Norway said, that's nice, but we don't want it. And so if the business groups don't support what you're putting, you could go too far here. And that's the problem the Obama administration faced. Some of the labor groups wanted either not to have these treaties or to eliminate investor-state arbitration or to reduce it to only national treatment, for example. And the business groups in the U.S. said, we're not interested if that's all you do. So one of the problems in multilateral is, what do you do with the existing treaties that grant all these rights, right? Are you going to take them away in favor of the least common denominator rules, these minimum rules of the road? Minimums don't do anything if you have maximums through MFN, right? The same thing, Europe is facing the same problem. That is, Europe is now supposed to negotiate BITs on behalf of Europe, but what do you do with the over 150 very favorable BITs that Germany has negotiated for itself and still exist? Are you going to just grandfather those in? Then what's the point? So there are complexities here of the rights that you've already accorded, people who have sunk expectations based on those. Keep in mind that this treaty, for example, and many of them, last for a minimum of 10 years. And then if you decide to terminate, existing investors that came in get another 10 years of protection. So you're talking a long period of time before you can do it. Incidentally, Argentina's treaty concluded in 1992. Last I could tell, they should have announced they're terminating it. They haven't. I wonder.